What's going on, guys? This is Martyrs Brigade 99 coming to you once again with another session of Bloodborne Commentary. Alright, so we're chilling out in Byrgenwerth. Now, I figured I'd just sit here and do a few invasions. A little change of scenery from the DLC areas. I mean, even though I was in Byrgenwerth, pretty sure we all know that the Hamlet and all those DLC areas are still pretty active, which is a good thing, right? But you PvP there so often, at least for me, I kind of need a change of pace, right? So I figured I'd just come here and see how many matches that I can get. And I was actually pretty surprised because I ran into so many gankers that it was insane. Like, after fighting so many, I was thinking to myself, like, holy crap, I didn't know that people had such a hard time with ROM. So another thing that I was thinking about, as I'm sitting here fighting, having one invasion after another, I was thinking to myself about Dark Souls 3. Right, and seeing that Dark Souls 3 will be out sometime in April, I believe. They gave the date April 12th. I can't help but to worry. I really can't help but to worry. Now, am I worried about the PvE? Not at all. 9 times out of 10, the PvE is going to be, just as good as every other Souls game. And I'm hoping the PvE at least exceeds Bloodborne. Because Bloodborne really has a high bar, at least in my personal opinion. Bloodborne has an awesome single player experience. It's really good if you want to do co-op, but it doesn't satisfy the third point of the triangle. Right? And it's just my own personal triangle, right? And the triangle that I'm talking about is good for the individual, good for co-op, and good for your opposition. And as far as Souls games, this is kind of how I judge whether, a Soul game is going to be good or not. Think about Dark Souls 1. And I really hate talking about Dark Souls 1 all the time. I really do. But seeing that, as they say, Dark Souls 3 is going to be the last one, I'm really hoping that they at least invest the same amount of time into thinking about PvP and how they want it to be as they're going to invest into the PvE. Because PvE, I'm not worried about it. So I'm really hoping they at least invest an equal amount of time. Because I think in order for the longevity to exist, Dark Souls 3 is going to have to be good for the individual, good for co-op, and also good for invaders. Bloodborne, in my opinion, is great for the individual and great for co-op. It's not really what I would call great for invaders, at least for me. Now, there are a lot of times when I'm doing invasions, I may run into a single individual. I may run into 2 people. Sometimes I run into 3. Right? A lot of times I'll lose. A lot of times I'll win. And the fact that I win is not always satisfying, at least for me. Right? One good thing about Dark Souls 1, everyone had hope. Right? Whether you were a lone host trying to play through the game and you just all of a sudden get invaded, whether you were gankers, you had hope because you definitely had the advantage of having multiple players. But even when you were a lone invader, you still had hope that, with the way the game was, the poise system, whether you like it or not, the backstab system, whether you liked it or not, and how everything else pretty much worked out, an invader can still, come into a world, notice that there are 2 or 3 people and say, you know what? I think I got a chance on this one. Honestly, a lot of times when I'm playing Bloodborne, it's kind of like, holy shit, it's 3 people. I'm screwed. So basically, when I approach a situation like that, it's kind of like, okay, let me just try to get some hits in and hope to parry the host, or hope that the two people, the one or two people that the host is with is so sloppy that I'm able to parry them, right? Because if it's not for that, the odds are stacked against me. I have 30% less HP, and I'm by myself. There's no poise. Hyper armor is unpredictable. You know what I'm saying? And heaven forbid you be an arcane build or a strength build. The reason why I say that, because even if you are lucky enough to hit a sloppy player with a parry and a visceral attack, you're going to do shit damage. Because the way the game is, it just it's more beneficial to be a skill build, or to at least have a build to where you have some investment in skill for the visceral attacks. And this is why, actually, that's not why. That's another reason why I prefer the 40-40. Number one, I like the variation of weapons, right? I don't like to be relegated to skill weapons, and I don't like to be relegated to strength weapons. I like having the options of being able to mess with all the weapons. Now, I do have a little shortcoming with my 40-40 build. There's some weapons that I have at plus 10 that I can't use at their maximum potential, like the recoil. It has 0 scaling in strength, right? So with me only having 40, that's 10 levels of scaling that I'm missing. Another example is like with the Blades of Mercy. That's 10 levels of scaling that I'm missing because there's no strength scaling. How you guys like that clothesline right there? That's one reason why I like this. But as I was saying, the game really caters to skill builds for a lot of those reasons. Fast swinging weapons and visceral attacks. Okay, so back to what I was talking about. There are a lot of times when I'm doing these invasions, and I don't really enter it like, okay, I think I can take these 3 guys out. A lot of times I just kind of sit back and I'm thinking like, you know what? I hope these guys get sloppy enough to where I can hit a parry. So I'm basically relegated to gun spamming, which to me is sloppy, but it is the way it is, the way the game is made. And it's not because I want to be sloppy, but it's because as it's 3 people running at me at full speed, swinging weapons, mashing the buttons at a frenzy. All they have to do is hit me and I'm screwed. Even if they're hitting me with a light weapon, I'm screwed because there's no poise. Even if I try to hit them with a heavy attack, with, let's just say, a Ludwig or something stronger, if they tap me first, right, and they're not really getting me at the right moment, right at that hyper armor moment, I'm screwed. So a lot of times when I do these invasions, I don't have the same amount of satisfaction as I had in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1. Now, do I get lucky? Of course I get lucky. But there's a lot of times where I'm like, you know what? This is just kind of crap. And I think this is one of the reasons the PvP in Bloodborne won't have the same amount of longevity as Dark Souls 1. In order to have that type of longevity, you need to have fun for the individual, fun for the co-opers, and also fun for the invaders. Right? The backstab system, although it was flawed, it allowed for invaders to have a successful experience. And granted, I'm glad that they're narrowing the window. I'm glad that they're making some changes to it. But the backstab mechanic needs to be incorporated. That was one of the big problems that I had, at least with this game, is because you have a backstab mechanic, but does it really work in PvP? No, it doesn't. So it makes your job as an invader that much harder. You know, it makes your efforts to take out 2 and 3 people like 10 times worse, because there's no way for you to punish. Think about the times you've invaded and you have 3 assholes, you know, 1 guy running at you at full speed, 1 guy in the background with the Evelyn or some other gun just shooting at you, knowing that at some point you have to swing. So even if you're able to, you know, try to attack 1 guy a couple times, you got some asshole either interrupting you or just catching you with the parry, because it's really hard to punish. As a matter of fact, I can't even say it's hard to punish. There is no punishment to gun spam. And as an invader, you do that enough times and people will eventually get turned off. They will acknowledge it as being a great game, but invasions is just kind of like, you know what? I'm just kind of sick of this. And that was one of the reasons why I stopped playing the game before the DLC. You know, because a lot of people, they kind of send me messages on YouTube. They're like, dude, I mean, come on. I mean, you know, upload some Bloodborne. And it's like, Bloodborne is good, but I mean, I've done all my characters. All the chalice dungeons are good. But I just don't really have a satisfying feeling when I do invasions. I already know, you know, when I was doing a lot of those videos on Dark Souls talking about toggle escaping, obviously I'm not talking about no damn tumble buffing. You know, I'm not talking about, you know, perma swap and move. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. But one thing that I believe is some things are necessary for death. As it relates to a Souls game, I think poise will be necessary. Not saying that it needs to be identical to the poise system we had in Dark Souls 1, but a functioning poise system. Definitely not like that crap we had in Dark Souls 2. But we definitely need to have a functioning poise system. They need to remove the 30% penalty. Now, just in case you guys are going to jump on me and say, well, they did remove it. Did you just watch the videos? You understand that the game is not final, right? So I'm just kind of throwing some things out there as I reflect on all the past Souls games. They need not to have that 30% penalty. If they do, I'm hoping that they have something similar to what they had in Demon Souls. A ring, you know, or something to compensate for that difference. 9 times out of 10, you know, seeing that they had a red-eyed orb, we're going to have, you know, a similar summoning system. Because the summoning system they had in this game also helped to ruin the invasions. Right? Because you know, ringing a sinister bell or co-oping was necessary. Which is why in most cases when you invade, you're invading 3 assholes. As opposed to maybe 1 person. Now there are some times, you know, because that's just like me. Every single time I do a playthrough, I mean, I just ring my bell in the beginning. Because why not? I'm looking for invasions. But everyone doesn't do that. So that was another thing that greatly hindered invasions in this game. You know, so like I said before, as I was sitting in Byrgenwerth, I was just sitting here just worried about a lot of things. Because if it is true that Dark Souls 3 will be the last Souls game, I am just really hoping that someone who plays PvP, you know what I'm saying, and who's familiar with it, who knows all the strengths and weaknesses that existed in Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, and Bloodborne, and they take all that information and they do the right thing. Because if Dark Souls 3 is going to be the last game, I'm hoping that it will last at least as long as Dark Souls 1 did. The variation of rings, you know, the variations of weapons, not, you know, 10 basically reskins like there was in Dark Souls 2, but actually weapons that move different, behave different, you know, not just a weapon that has the exact same moveset, but one is skill and one strength. I'm not talking about that crap. I'm talking about different movesets, unique weapons, just like we saw in Dark. Because actually, when it comes to weapons, I think Bloodborne is the best. Well, I'm not talking variety, but I'm talking about as far as uniqueness and how they move and how they work. I really love the idea of the trick weapons. Now, I'm not suggesting that I hope they have trick weapons in Dark Souls 3. What I am saying, however, is I hope they use a lot of those unique ideas and don't just return, with the classic Kumos, Claymores. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure they're going to have those, but I just really hope they pull some more tricks out of their sleeves when it comes to the weapon variety in Dark Souls 3. So, I don't know. I am so worried. Not worried about the PvE, but this has basically been 2 games that I've been somewhat inactive in PvP, and I'm kind of sick of it. I kind of want to get back to where it was in Dark Souls 1 without having to go back to Dark Souls 1. I've been on the PS4 since PS4 has been released, and I just simply can't go back to those PS3 graphics. I get people asking me all the time, Brigade, why don't you just go back to Dark Souls 1? I don't want to go back to PS3 graphics. I don't want to go back to, more of the same. I want a new experience to be expanded upon all the good things that existed in Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne. And granted, there are some good things in Dark Souls 2, but the reason why I'm not mentioning Dark Souls 2 is because I didn't play that game a lot. I didn't like it. I didn't like the moves. So granted, there may be some good things about it. Well, actually, the dual wielding. That is one thing that I did experience that I think they improved upon when you compare Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 2. There may be other things, but I didn't play it long enough to really talk about it. So that's about it. That's my rant. A lot of times I don't really have a particular subject in mind, so I'll just kind of sit here, think about something, and I'm like, you know what, this is on my mind. Let me just go ahead and produce a commentary. So I'm just sharing some thoughts, my worries about Dark Souls 3, hoping everything turns out right, because if it will indeed be our last Souls game, I just hope it would be the next masterpiece for both single player, co-op, and PvP. Alright guys, so hey, until next time, Martyrs Brigade is